Hi, I'm Tommy Thompson and this is Design Dive, a series on artificial intelligence in game design. In our first video, we looked at one of the best shooters of 2016, Titanfall 2, and how Respawn Entertainment embraced their legacy to craft the first proper successor to the Call of Duty franchise. But in this video, I'm going to talk about the other great shooter of 2016, a game with even greater baggage, not only seeking to re-establish a franchise for the modern day, but to live up to a legacy that defined the very genre it exists within. I'm talking, of course, of id Software's reboot of Doom. Doom, like Titanfall 2, is a defining moment for the future of first-person shooter game design. But unlike its contemporary, it's a critique of 21st century philosophies. Confident in its approach and ruthless in its execution, Doom is the culmination of a vision statement id has followed for many years. To redefine what a shooter could be, to challenge what a shooter should be. Doom 2016 exists in a world that differs greatly from the era when the original game launched. In 1993, Doom addressed a question that nobody yet thought to answer. What is a first-person shooter? Id's breakout success cemented in the eyes of both consumers and developers the idea of what shooters should be and set the template for many a clone and successor. As technology and form factor has evolved, the template has subsequently shifted, as greater design affordances can now be made, with franchises such as Quake, Unreal, Halo, Far Cry, Crysis, Call of Duty, Battlefield, and even Titanfall continuing to answer this question in their own way. In doing so, Doom is now a rogue quantity, a franchise that defined a genre that no longer reflects it. However, Doom 2016 is an important milestone in a journey that has driven not just id Software, but its parent company Bethesda Softworks to challenge that status quo. To re-examine that question Doom itself initially answered and turn into something new. Is this all a first-person shooter can be? Bethesda has tackled this question for as long as id Software has, with not just the ever-popular Elder Scrolls franchise established in 1994, but also the numerous first-person adventure games in the Terminator franchise in the early 1990s. This has since persisted into the 21st century as the heyday of Halo and Call of Duty firmly established the contemporary FPS genre. Bethesda has always been sniffing at the periphery, challenging the status quo indirectly, giving us the likes of Elder Scrolls Oblivion and later Skyrim, whilst also reviving the Fallout franchise in a similar but different vein. Meanwhile, id continued to challenge the original question and over time lost sight of their own core strengths. While Quake pushed the Doom design principles into the 3D realm, 2004's Doom 3 attempted to re-establish what Doom is and what id meant to that genre. Whilst a graphical powerhouse, Doom 3 lost sight of what made the original tick, a point we'll return to later, whilst also losing sight of the shift occurring within the genre at that time. It left id in a quandary, losing their gravitas and power over the very genre they'd built. Even the continued development of the Quake franchise failed to rekindle this spark, with the successful albeit muted launch of 2005's Quake 4, developed by Reverence Software. It's perhaps fitting that ZeniMax Media, the parent company of Bethesda Softworks, bought id Software at a time when both appeared to be addressing the same problem. Not just what else can be done with the first-person perspective, but whether the creative currency cemented by the likes of Doom was still legal tender in a world where Call of Duty and Halo had rewritten the rules. Non-linear map design, broad and varied weapon mechanics, unlimited inventory loadouts, item-driven health systems, melee combat had all in some way or another been lost or tweaked over time. What had been lost seemed no longer important to the 21st century gaming culture. But it's clear that both id and Bethesda shared a vision. There's more that can be done here, and we will do it by deviating from the status quo, as this is where the true innovation lies. Bethesda had learned this the hard way with their exploration of more contemporary fare with the likes of Rogue Warrior and Wet, released in 2009. However, it's clear this change of philosophy had largely been embraced in subsequent titles. What started as a flawed, albeit ambitious pursuit back in 2011, with both id's underserved FPS action-adventure Rage, as well as Bethesda's produced Brink, eventually matured into something that tightened up its ambitions and delivered something sharper, more consistent, but also single-player focused. This has led to the likes of Machine Games' 2014 release Wolfenstein: The New Order, the breakout success of Arcane Studios' Dishonored in 2012, and their more recent release of Prey. But above them all, Doom is, for me, the standout. A game that doesn't just challenge what a first-person shooter can be, it gives a more definitive, more absolute response to the contemporary market. You're doing it wrong. That's a bold and ambitious statement from a studio that is arguably no longer fit to make it, but Doom delivers in spades. So let's talk about how Doom approaches first-person shooter design, the innovations it brings, and the traditions it reaffirms, but also how the non-player character AI is influential in achieving it. This is AI in games after all, I have to talk about the AI at some point. In order to understand the importance of Doom 2016, we first need to consider the most critical aspect of the 1993 original: movement. Doom is built primarily on a player's capability to move quickly and fluidly around a large and non-linear environment. This is a reflection of the manner in which maps are constructed, and the time in which Doom itself was created. Unlike more contemporary franchises and their level design, classic Doom shares many similarities with dungeon crawlers of the 1980s and 1990s. Combat areas, corridors, walkways, locked doors, key rooms, environmental traps, and much more. Doom successfully transposes this dungeon format and renders it as a 3D shooting game. This success comes largely from adapting the way in which space is constructed to make interesting and challenging combat sequences in a first-person perspective. This three-dimensional space also allows for basic platforming sequences to be crafted, as well as give hints to future areas of the level that you can't actually reach yet. While much of it is inhibited by the technology of its time, it still does a fantastic job at establishing pace, providing frenetic and kinetic combat, and a sense of unease with our surroundings that can only be afforded from the first-person perspective. This is further embellished through Doom and Doom 2 Hell on Earth, to create a variety of interesting environments within which the player must move through at pace. Gun battles often arise in environments that give players the freedom to move, to aim, to attack, to evade, to run, to fall, and even hide where necessary. While the use of weaponry is critical to the definition of the genre, Doom establishes itself as a game where players express themselves throughout their movement, first and foremost. This freedom of movement is also applied to the non-player characters and their pathfinding AI. The actual movement systems are rather simple, with characters capable of moving in cardinal and ordinal directions and making random decisions if it's blocked by local geometry. But each monster has its own movement patterns, which combined with either close or long-range attacks introduces a need for strategy, to establish priority. Who is the biggest threat? Who are the easy pickings? By establishing this, we can dive into the heat of battle, eliminate the more immediate threats, and then clear out the rest. This is naturally embellished over time, with the more aggressive and projectile-based imps, barons, and hell knights replacing the standard hit-scanning grunts. They do a lot more damage, but you have a better chance of dodging the incoming attack. Meanwhile, close-range attacks are introduced through the charging pinky demons. But all of these enemies are reliant on a clear and accessible path from their location to player. This constraint is then removed by the likes of the Cacodemon and the Lost Soul that remove any barriers brought by terrain and can attack either at range or up close and minimize your ability to exploit small geometry or verticality as a defensive tactic. One strategic advantage that can be pulled from the Doom NPCs is that they are prone to attacking other non-player characters, a trick that can be caused by the NPC being awoken from its dormant state by another enemy attacking it by accident. This is caused by the fact that NPCs maintain a line of sight on their target through fellow enemies, but don't factor whether another monster is in front of them when attacking. As such, direct or indirect damage taken from these attacks will result in a period of infighting. While their interest in eliminating a fellow monster will eventually decay in time, it gives prime opportunity for the player to attack and eliminate those otherwise distracted opponents. This once again ties back into the strategic element of combat, allowing for players to cause a ruckus among a group of monsters, then move around to focus on the key targets and weaken the enemy force. It's this element of movement, pace and attack priority that in many respects is lost in the transition to full 3D with 2004's Doom 3. The fully modelled space stations of Mars, at the time a true feat of 3D rendering thanks to the id Tech 4 engine, often provide a limited range of movement. Despite the expansion of the player's agency to include jumping, crouching, and a full range of head movement, the environments often fail to capitalise on them as part of the combat sequences. Despite that, the strategic behaviour of the AI monsters is markedly similar, with zombies stumbling towards the player while demons chasing either overland or in the air as before. The movement and flow that has been so well established in Doom and Doom 2 is largely removed, with a clear emphasis towards a more staggered rate of progression, limited visibility, and stifled navigation, as Doom 3 moves towards a horror-driven aesthetic. This is exacerbated by the dynamic introduction of non-player characters frequently through use of teleportation and monster closets, an idea taken from the original Doom games but not executed as well as it has done previously. Rather than the player running into and around a large number of monsters in arena-like environments, monsters are frequently teleported in front as well as behind the player while trapped in small corridors. This significantly changes the dynamic of player movement and shifts the priority towards shooting as the primary mechanic. Even more so, the strategic aspect of target acquisition and takedown is reduced to simply eliminating the biggest thing closest to you. If anything, the true lifeblood of Doom is only ever found during the boss sequences in Doom 3, as well as the latter stages of the campaign as we enter parts of Hell, where the game provides more room to maneuver. Put simply, while Doom and Doom 2 encourage the player to rush into battle, Doom 3 advises that in order to take one step forward, you often have to take 2 steps back. The Doom of 2016 claws back this design philosophy, but it's not an overnight process. Rather, it's one that has slowly matured for almost 10 years both in id Software itself, as well as farther afield. Doom made a clear statement upon its release in May 2016, with its strengths drawn from not just its reverence to the tropes of old, but resurrecting them to fit within modern video game design. But to single out Doom as the sole contributor towards this is disingenuous, given it's been a gradual process dated back as far as 2011, given many of the mechanics and design conceits of Doom can be found in id Software's Rage. For all intents and purposes, Rage is id Software's attempt at creating a first-person adventure game akin to the Fallout model that Bethesda has constructed in the last 10 years. Rage is often remembered in gaming history as middling and average, with a lackluster narrative and a disjointed experience, often reliant upon reuse of existing maps to go into for additional missions. But the one thing that the game gets right is combat, and establishes itself as a true alternative to many of the Call of Duty clones of the era. While Rage adopts modern health mechanics, it focuses on a rich weapon diversity and crafting system alongside a series of enemy mutants and soldiers that justify their inclusion. Every battle requires the player to consider not just whether they have the right weapon, but also the right ammo loaded in the gun. Meanwhile, the enemy AI is fast, ruthless, and often tricky to predict in its movement, which makes it all the more rewarding when you take them down. Furthermore, Machine Games' fantastic 2014 release Wolfenstein: The New Order lay fertile ground upon which Doom could grow. The New Order was in many ways the herald of Doom's revival, and in some respects a weird case of history repeating itself. Wolfenstein being a recognised, though arguably not as revered franchise that drew critical acclaim by challenging the status quo of first-person shooters. This included the return of unlimited weapon inventories and dual wielding, but also merging contemporary concepts of skill tree unlocks into a weapon and perk upgrade system. In addition, the game does a fantastic job of seamlessly integrating non-linear map design, courtesy of a largely understated stealth mechanic. Numerous sequences allow for players to minimise the threat before it all goes loud. While it still has many Call of Duty style corridor fight sequences, there are equally loud and bombastic boss battles fighting out in open ground, a concept much removed from the current state of contemporary shooters, with arguably the Warden battles from Halo 5 being the only similar experience on the market at that time. But it's not just in AAA development we see this approach find purchase. The Doom modding community has something to say on this, even to this day, over 20 years later. And we cannot discuss the resurrection of classic FPS design conceit without taking time to talk about Brutal Doom. developed by Marcos Abonante, aka Sergeant Mark IV, Brutal Doom reinterprets the mechanics of Doom and Doom 2 through a lens of contemporary shooter design. It's achieved by building upon years of successful mods that have gentrified Doom for a modern marketplace, introducing jumping, crouching, and 5 degrees of movement, plus a ton of graphical optimizations and improvements. But what sets Brutal Doom apart is how it rebuilds shooting mechanics, non-player character AI, and core gameplay systems while adding a new layer of graphical fidelity. Brutal Doom brings weapon reloading, dual wielding, aiming down sights, monster gibbing, executions, new NPC AI behaviours, and much more to the Doom we know and love. This forces players to re-evaluate how we approach traditional Doom gameplay while adopting a more contemporary approach towards our actions within the environment. While much of the changes made, notably the violence, is outright excess, many of the additions enhance the core Doom gameplay loop. What's interesting about this is that there are strong parallels between Brutal Doom, Wolfenstein: The New Order, and Doom 2016, each embracing the violent and chaotic nature of classic FPS shooters while also utilising more contemporary mechanics. While Doom 2016 is the youngest of the three, that isn't to say it's but a mere facsimile of Brutal Doom. And it's time to really talk about that and understand what it is that Doom achieves as a reboot, but perhaps more importantly, as a sequel.
Fuck yourself!
Doom 2016 reinvents its mechanics in a way that is refreshing while also distinct from its heritage. Modern shooters such as Call of Duty, Battlefield, and Halo typically approach campaign combat as a defensive forward motion, to walk forward, trigger the encounter, and then rush to the nearest cover in an effort to maintain our health and manage resources. This is driven largely by health mechanics that aim to keep you part of the action whilst avoiding the need to backtrack to pick up health items. Once we trigger the encounter, we'll hold our ground and eliminate the enemy before progressing forward. While Titanfall 2 evolves the mechanics of Call of Duty and subverts this in a more contemporary fashion, Doom 2016 does so in an effort to tie back to the original. We run towards danger and attack it head on. However, it takes one design principle from Call of Duty and applies it to this aggressive stance by introducing the glory kill. Glory kills are executions in Doom that, aside from being obscenely violent and kinda cool, allow for health to be rejuvenated during the heat of battle. But also, they act as a form of temporary cover, given you're largely invincible during the execution and provide time for the player to re-evaluate the situation and immediately put their new ideas into effect. This subtly resolves the issue in classic Doom to find health during combat, which often resulted in more awkward and staggered sequences as we backtrack to find health packs and armour. This creates an interesting dynamic puzzle-solving scenario during every encounter. Do we utilise the many weapons at our disposal, and the enhancements we unlock for them akin to that seen in Rage, or do we focus on wearing the enemy down enough to go for a glory kill? The attack priority of classic Doom is now multi-objective in nature. We're not just trying to kill them, we're also trying to find the next stash of health to keep us alive. And the very nature through which we unlock it maintains the pace, keeps you fighting and in the thick of the action. Once again, it's all about moving into the right place at the right time. This reinvention of player movement is reinforced in other ways, and not just in the frighteningly fast speed of the Doom Marine, the construction of non-linear, vertical and open environments, and the ways in which non-player character AI can move within it. This brings us to map design. Modern shooters are typically reliant upon the exploding corridor formula, whereby a broad linear path is established with the occasional fork in the road, or larger arenas to have more epic combat sequences. Doom, on the other hand, embraces the classic non-linear approach we previously saw back in Wolfenstein: The New Order, often with a small element of backtracking and in many cases a lot of platforming. Unlike Wolfenstein, however, Doom revels in vertical level design, with platforming puzzle sequences throughout many maps, but also as means to hint towards hidden locations and later progress in each stage, which becomes even more important when you consider there's often a lot of backtracking. The third main locale in the Doom campaign, the Foundry, is a fantastic example of this, a self-contained environment that is built on multiple vertical tiers, but requires players to frequently backtrack through the space to find items of interest. It's a massive deviation from the contemporary approach to shooter map design. Doom forces players to explore the environment and, quite interestingly, rewards players with combat, with many of these platforming puzzles concluded with a fight against the demon hordes. Meanwhile, the NPCs in Doom 2016 have varying levels of agency when moving around the map. Feeding again from rage, we have monsters that are frighteningly fast and can navigate this environment quickly. Many platforms you can jump to reach, they can as well. It keeps the focus on movement once more. You gotta find the high ground, define the kill box, lay waste to the hordes of hell, and keep moving. You're not safe up there. They'll not only attack you at range, but many will close the distance and climb to reach you. The navigation framework provided is incredibly rich, and it's rare that any monsters struggle to find and attack you, regardless of where you're standing. Overall, this combination of fast movement, open map design, glory kills, and aggressive AI forces players to exploit opportunities when they arise, then move quickly to find the next one. Jump into the fray, move, attack, and move again. To stay still is to die, there's no fight or flight, to survive you gotta rip and tear. Now, I mentioned earlier that this game acts well not only as a reboot, but also as a sequel, and that's because this philosophy of rage, this kinetic and energetic approach laced throughout the entirety of Doom's design, is clearly referring back to the roots of the 1993 original. The design team is aware of the strengths of the brand and its lineage. The masterstroke that cements this whole thing together is how this self-awareness is applied to the rest of the game itself to give it heritage. First up, Mick Gordon's brutal and crunching soundtrack that oscillates between unsettling and eerie during the quieter moments to full-blown audio rage when rushing towards the demon hordes works to empower and reward the player. The rhythmic metal helps focus the player during the most heated of combat and helps signal to the player a need to elevate their game when it explodes through your speakers. Much like Gordon's prior work on Killer Instinct, it carries samples and references to the original soundtrack, reinforcing that link back to the classic game of the 90s. Secondly, the Doom guy himself embodies the expectation and energy of players. The game is clearly aiming to evoke the energy of the classic Doom titles, and as such, we as players come to the game with expectations of how it works. One of the fun inclusions in Doom 2016 is the emphasis on establishing the story behind the world and the operations happening on Mars, but never to the point that it supersedes the player and their actions. We're here to kill demons, so let me kill demons. Story briefings are discarded, delicate components of the UAC facility are destroyed with disregard to their value, the rage is pent up from 20 years of waiting since Doom 2 to rip these sons of bitches to shreds, and the Doom guy acts as the living embodiment of all that pent up frustration. Combat sequences result in a perfect alignment between player and avatar, sharing in the joy of releasing their anger upon this monstrous horde. This all comes back to the cleverly constructed narrative that reinforces this cultural and design-driven bond between 2016 and the Doom of old. The subtle implication that this isn't just a reboot, but it's a sequel to Doom 64, in which the Doom Marine stays in hell to ensure no further demons escape. While the events of Doom 3 imply it takes place either in a parallel dimension or in a different timeline, it seems that in Doom 2016 the Marine has been trapped in hell ever since Doom 64, eventually trapped and locked away in a tomb until he is awoken once more. It's a clever parallel to the game's launch, resurrected in a different time and having to prove himself once again, a bold choice that could only be achieved if the design of the game itself could hold its own ground. Doom is a triumph, a reboot that almost never happened, and one that certainly had some missteps along the way. A resurrection with Reverence, a game that acknowledges the storied history of the franchise and aims to revitalise it for the modern day. If anything, it recognises the most important aspect of the original and why fans still clamour for more to this day. It's a hell of a lot of fun being knee-deep in the dead. Thanks for watching this second Design Dive video. Design Dive, like all my other videos, is made possible thanks to the generous support of my patrons, whose names are on screen now. AI in Games is now a monthly crowd-funded show, as I'm investing a lot more of my time to making these videos better and more frequently. Patreon backers get access to the AI in Games Discord server, early access to new content, a monthly newsletter, Patreon exclusive videos, have access to the video topic list, can vote for the next video, and even pitch new videos for me to make. Design Dive is still in its early stages, but I have a number of topics ready to discuss. Patrons can now vote on what the next topic is, and it's going to be looking at either Borderlands 2 or Aliens Colonial Marines. What do you think? Head to the link in the description, cast your vote, and we'll take it from there. In the meantime, patrons have voted for the next case study on BioShock Infinite, so I better get cracking. Thanks for watching once again, and I'll see you later.